hot dog. Okay, so I'm Sarah Crews. There's a lot of new faces. I joined this group like about, I guess it was like a year ago, because I started last September around close to my birthday. And I have grown so much spiritually, and I would be crazy not to share this with you guys, because the people who I was in the group with, like, you know, like Madison, Lucas, there's a lot of you, Gabby, Megan, you guys have helped me prepare, or you guys have prepared me for all the obstacles that I've had to face these past couple months. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about, me and Whitney, about how God's really worked in our lives and made His presence just so evident. So I'm just kind of going to give like a little bit of a background on how my past has been. I grew up Christian in high school. I stopped going to church. I got really involved with band. And then my senior year, I got into partying, alcohol. I was smoking pot, I was drinking, I was doing just stuff I shouldn't have been doing. And so I got into the MLT program here in Louisville at JCC. It was kind of like that. I had to quit everything I was doing in Glasgow, my hometown, and just move right up here. And thankfully my aunt lives in Louisville, so I got to live with her. A year into the program, that week before finals, my aunt kicked me out because I was still doing things I shouldn't have been doing. So I was forced to live on my own, be independent, which I had not ever done in my life before. So that forced me to be completely dependent on God. I got involved at Southeast, and I felt like it was time to get involved in a small group. So I went to the Welcome Center. I asked them how could I get involved with college's ministry, and they told me about Bill. So I met Bill and Christy at a coffee shop. And I did not realize just how life-changing all of this would be for me. So I did that. So everyone in the group was basically really, they'd grown up Christian, the majority of you guys had, and I had to, but not as much as you all had. Didn't know the Bible like others did, but I had the courage to ask Christy to really teach me about it. And so I started meeting with Christy an hour before group started on Monday nights, and so we had Bible study, and we went over John. I bought a new Bible called the Wayfinding Bible, which was a really good study Bible. And so that definitely grew spiritually right there, with the help of everyone else in the group. So my last semester of school, I was doing like 70, 80 hours of work and school altogether, and I was faced with the challenge of whether I should stay in Louisville or move back home to Glasgow. I was kind of back and forth because Glasgow is where I pretty much rebelled against God. I didn't have anything to do with Him, but it would have made more sense for me to stay in Glasgow, or in Louisville, not Glasgow. And so I ended up taking a job in Glasgow. It just kind of got handed to me. One day I just got the urge to call TJ in Glasgow, and they asked me to come to an interview the next day, and they gave me the job. So I accepted it 2 weeks later. So I moved back home, in March. I started working every weekend in Glasgow, and I would work at U of L Hospital during the week. And when I started working at TJ, it was in March. And so I was like, at that time I was kind of studying Job, which that kind of ties in the story later. And in May, in May, I completely moved back home, and I was like, the first thing I need to do before I get involved with all my old buddies, which I knew I don't need to be any part of, I need to get involved in the church as soon as possible, and so that I didn't lose any of my relationship with God. And so I got involved in church because the job that I got accepted at, the guy that was a supervisor over me, was involved at Glenview Christian Church in Glasgow, and he invited me to come to Glenview. And their Sunday school is called Breakfast Blend. They meet at a coffee shop in the mornings before church service starts, and they provide coffee. We could watch a video for a Bible study. And so I walk in for the first time, and I met Whitney, and she didn't seem herself at all. I didn't really know the background. I just met her. But I met her and her family, and so that's kind of how I met Whitney. So I'll let her kind of give her past and how we met, and then we'll kind of go from there.
You want to introduce us? Have you met everybody yet?
No, I have not. I've met several, but no, not everybody. But I'm Whitney, so.
Losinski.
Losinski, yes. So I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in the church, but I graduated from high school in 2006, and I went to Trine University, which is in Indiana. I graduated from there in 2010 with a chemical engineering degree, and I ended up getting a job in Glasgow, Kentucky. So that's how I ended up down here. 2 months after I moved down here, I married my high school sweetheart. We had been together for, I think, 6.5 years when we got married. But he stayed up there and worked up there until we got married. So I was down here for 2 months before I met him. So when I was down here, I wanted to get plugged into a church, and that's how I got involved at Glenview. This is a funny story, but I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know any churches down here because I wasn't familiar with anything. So I just got online, and I looked for one that I knew their music, and that was the one that I knew their music.
Nice.
So I decided that was the one I was going to go to. But it turned out to be it's a blessing for me. So Jake, that's my husband, he moved down right after we got married, and we really got involved in the church. He got plugged in. He had grown up Catholic, and I was in a non-denominational church, so we both grew up in the church. We're very conservative, religious, so we got plugged into the church down there, really got involved in it. He kind of got away from the Catholic faith, and he was starting to really grow in his walk with God. And we were going to breakfast blend. We got involved in a Bible study. We had both got involved in sports, so we were really just kind of plugging in down there. We absolutely loved it. We both I don't know, our lives were pretty perfect up until this point, basically. I had grown up in a really, really supportive family. My parents were both married. We never really went through a lot of struggles, I would say. We weren't rich, but we also weren't struggling with money financially or anything like that. I had never lost anybody. We had lost my grandma, but she had been sick for a while, so we didn't really struggle as far as, I don't know, I just had never been through any real trying times in my life. Like, school came easy to me, sports was easy. When we moved down here, my husband and I had bought a house. We both had really good jobs. Our house was almost paid for. We just bought a car. So life was just really, really good. And then on March 24th of this year, I came home from work, and I found a note that my husband, he had taken his own life, and just in that moment, my whole life was just completely upside down. Everything that I had planned for my future was just gone. Everything that I thought God had planned for me was upside down. Honestly, I didn't want to live anymore. I wanted to take my own life. I prayed, I begged God to take my life. Just let me be with Jake and let me be with God. It was very, very, very trying time for me. I started going to counseling right away after that, and through my counselor, I just started to have a lot of questions about God. Like, why did this happen? What was God's role in it? Just a lot of questions. And my counselor wasn't doing the spiritual side of the counseling with me, and so we asked my pastor, Richard, if he would do some of the counseling with me and just kind of talk to me and answer some of my questions. And so I started meeting with him every week, and one of the first things that he said to me was that he was going to pray, him and his wife were praying for somebody to come into my life that would just be a really good friend for me and somebody that would just help me get through this. And so that was 2 weeks before Sarah walked into Breakfast Blend. And when she walked in, she was so bubbly.
Really?
Yeah. She was so happy and so bubbly. And this was still fresh for me, so I was not in a good place. I was crying. I did not want anything to do with anybody. I just wanted to be with myself. And she walked in, and my parents had been down there supporting me, and so she didn't have anyone to sit with, and they asked her to sit with us, and I was so mad. I'm like, Mom, no. But I knew I couldn't hold it together. But then we went to church, and somebody had asked or told her to sit with me, and so she sat with me, and I think they had told you my story a little bit, and so she kind of knew what was going on. But when I walked out of church that Sunday, my pastor stopped me, and he's like, you know what was a godsend today? And I said, what? And he said, Sarah. And I was just like, how do you know that? Like, but he said it, and it's proven so true. So
Yeah, and that's kind of just where everything starts, with how God really made his presence just so evident in our lives. So we met, and I just had like no clue how big of an impact I would have in her life and how much God would use me. and work through me to be there for comfort and be there just to listen and just to be there for. I go back to Glasgow, and I'm trying not to hang out with the old buddies that I had that weren't good for me spiritually. And I had a friend that I was talking to at that time, and it was funny because he texted me, and I was telling him, like, I don't have anybody in Glasgow. I just met Whitney, and I didn't think there was, like, no way I could be of any help. And he texted me, and he said, it wasn't a mistake coming home. Someone needed you more here. You'd still be here. And that's definitely a sign from God. God working through him to text me that, to let me know that I do have a reason to be in Glasgow, that God's working through me and using me in some of the most insignificant places. So, let's see. The weekend before, her mom stayed with her. Her family's from Michigan. They came down and stayed with her for 3 months. Your mom did?
4 months, almost 4 months.
Mm-hmm. And it was the weekend that her mom was about to leave for the first time. She was going to be home, for the first time without her husband. So she was volunteering with Vacation Bible School, and I was like, okay, I'll help. So we did that with the preschoolers. That was very challenging. Oh, man. And so we did that Sunday through Wednesday. And then that Friday, I went to her house, and we had decided that we would do a Bible study every Wednesday, kind of get plugged in and get to know each other. Yeah, just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really know what Bible study to do. We didn't know where to start in the Bible. But we decided that next Saturday we'd come to Southeast, and I'd take her up here with this Saturday service. And she loved it. So we came up here, and we went to the gift shop. We had just enough time before service started. And I encouraged her to buy this Jesus Calling book. I don't know how many of you guys use these or read this devotional.
What is
it? It is
it?
awesome. Jesus Calling.
It's the best devotion.
It is. Oh my goodness, it is. I love it. Throughout school and all of my struggles, it felt like God was really using this to speak to me. So I felt like I should encourage Whitney to get it, especially with what she was going through. So we did that. We got the Jesus Calling book, and then we bought a study called Gideon. But with the Jesus Calling book, it was really neat, and I'll let you
Okay, so
do that.
we came up here on Saturday. So my parents had just come back down to spend the weekend with me. They just wanted to leave me for a week. They were too scared to leave me longer than that. So they were back down, and so that Sunday I was getting ready for church, and I think I was in the bathroom doing my hair or something, and my mom came in, and I had left this on the table or something, and she picked it up, and she was just kind of flipping through it to see what it was, and she just happened to flip open to this page. And so she came in and she had to read this to me. And this is what it said. It says, "This is the time in your life when you must learn to let go of loved ones, of possessions, of control. In order to let go of something that is precious to you, you need to take rest in my presence, where you are complete. Take time to bask in the light of my love. As you relax more and more, your grasping hand gradually opens up, releasing your prized possession into my care. You can feel secure even in the midst of cataclysmic changes, through awareness of my continual presence. The one who never leaves you is the same one who never changes. I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. As you release more and more things into my care, remember that I never let go of your hand. Herein lies your security, which no one and no circumstance can take from you." And the crazy part about this is that this passage that my mom just happened to flip it open to is dated March 24th, which is the day that my husband took his own life. So that was just like, that was God talking to me. And I didn't even believe it at the time, because I was just like, I don't know, coincidence. It's just coincidence. But, man, since then, there's been so many things. But this too, I took it to Sarah and I let her read it. And I took it to my pastor and I let him read it. And when I was talking to my pastor, he said, why didn't we have this book the day that it happened? Why couldn't we have seen that passage the day that it happened? And I told him, if I had seen this the day that it happened, I would have just looked right past it. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. So it was just God's perfect timing to reveal that to me when he did. And I just take so much comfort in that.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah.
That was like one of the first biggest things that we saw, how God was working. And she showed me that at breakfast plan, and I just got chills and goosebumps, and like, I don't know, you just know that it's God. So while actually that day that I think she had showed me that, we were maybe like the first or second week into the AHA studies of Kyle Idleman, and that was a big It was awesome for me and Whit, but I think mostly Whit with what she was going through.
Yeah, just going through that study, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's Awakening, Honesty, and Action. Just going through that, my awakening was when Jake passed away, and I just had to be honest with myself, and I didn't know the Bible. I mean, I had grown up in the church, I had read the Bible, but I never studied the Bible. I didn't pray every day. I still don't know the Bible, to be honest. I mean, I'm learning because we've been starting our Bible studies, but just being able to open up to people and reveal that I didn't know the Bible, because I had always been so intimidated by people, at church, that they just seemed like they knew everything about the Bible. They seemed like they were such good Christian people that I didn't want to feel below them, I guess. And so I was too afraid to kind of reveal that I didn't know that. And that has been such a blessing for me, just to be able to be honest with myself and be honest with everybody else. And through that, the awakening part of it for me is through counseling and through my Bible studies with Sarah and through volunteering at the church and doing all that extra stuff. I have just been able to grow so much, and it's helped me tremendously.
Yeah, and we started the Gideon study. Something funny. Actually, when we were trying to figure out which study to do, we were between Malachi and Gideon. Malachi kind of fit her story a lot better about what happened with Jake.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were flipping through Malachi. We're like, okay, is this a study that we should do? Should we do Gideon? So for you girls, you can like really relate. There was a passage in there, and it said
In Malachi.
In Malachi, yeah. Like there's a certain part where you had to give up jewelry that you wear pretty often and give it away to someone. And we're like, no. We're going to
That's just crossing the line, right?
No, we ain't going to put ourselves in that situation. So we picked Gideon. So that right there just proves how God can work in spite of our bad decisions. So it ended up Gideon was the perfect study for us to do. And definitely talking about how God can work through our weaknesses. That through our weaknesses, God can reveal His strength. We did that once a week. And we're talking about Gideon actually, which I thought was pretty awesome. So you guys are pretty familiar with Gideon. How the Midianites were kind of taking over the Israelites, and God called Gideon to save Israelites. And he was the weakest in his family, the weakest of the clan, and so he didn't believe that he had the strength to do that. He was so insecure of himself, and through all the signs that you guys were talking about, God really revealed Himself to him, and he had faith to defeat them, even with the 300 in his army that he had. So we kind of we wanted to go through just the 3 main points of how God really worked in our life and revealed Himself. And the first one was God's strength is revealed in our weakness. Do you want to take over that one?
Yeah, so one of the verses that stood out in the study is 2 Corinthians 12, and it's 9 and 10. It says, "My power works best in weakness, so now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And this has just been so true in my story. I was in such a deep depression and such a hard time going through Jake's death that I should be angry, I should be sad, I should be mad, I should be just all these different emotions. But for some reason, when I open my Bible and when I'm with Sarah doing our Bible study or when I'm volunteering at the church, I just have this unexplainable joy and this peace. This message that God, I really feel like God gave me this message, and just, I don't know, it's just when I have that Bible and I'm just studying, it's just this peace that I have. I know that I'm going to see my husband again. I know that this is God's plan for my life. He's working in this. He's working through this somehow, and I might not understand it, but I know He's here helping me get through this. I'm sure you guys know this song is "Keep Making Me" by Sidewalk Prophets. That song just make me broken so I can be healed. And then it goes on to say, "Till you are my one desire, till you are my one true love, till you are my breath, my everything, Lord, please keep making me." We've had this discussion in our Breakfast Bible study where I've had people say, never pray for patience because God will test you. And through all of this, I'm just thinking, I should be in this horrible, horrible time in my life, and yet somehow this has been one of the best times of my life as far as my spiritual growth. And I would do absolutely anything to have my husband back with me, but I can see the good coming out of this in ways that I never thought I would, and it's just been such a blessing in my life.
And I, like, going through all of this with Whitney, and she has definitely strengthened my faith in God. Just seeing how she sees all of the good in all of this. Normally people would be like, wanting to not see God in this, wondering why God would do something like this. Take someone so precious away from me, someone who I've lived my whole life for. But she's so right, because there's often times that we're too scared to ask God, teach me patience, teach me like anything, because we're so scared of what He's going to do in our lives. But when we are broken, when we are down to our last string, that's when God works the most. That's when God is going to work through you and shine His light through you. And I think
And we've been able to see it too, just with us being together, going to church and things. There's so many people that have come up to us and they just seem like so much more energetic around us with their faith. And I think that's God revealing Himself through our weakness.
Definitely. Oh, so
And
true.
another thing along that same line, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks after my husband passed away, my pastor and his wife, they went to the Orange Conference, which is a conference for youth ministers. And I don't know if you've heard of Perry Noble, but he was speaking at that conference, and he is the preacher at New Spring Church, which is it's a mega church in South Carolina. And his story just fit into my whole story so perfectly, because he was the pastor at that church, and it was growing really, really fast. He had a really good life at the time. He was married, had a wife that he loved. He had a little girl that his life was just going really good, and yet he was also suicidal. He was so overwhelmed by his circumstances and so just the stress of everything that he was suicidal. And just hearing his testimony and how it had worked through, I guess my pastor, just hearing that, and just at the timing again, it was God's perfect timing that they got to hear his story and that they could bring it back to me. But he has used his testimony to help a lot of different people in his church, and it's really helped his church grow too. So that's another way that God revealed Himself in his weakness.
And it's awesome because we have podcasts on our phone, and I'm sure you guys know what that is. Because I didn't. She had to tell me about it. I'm pretty done with all that stuff. But it's crazy because every time that we listen to a Perry Noble sermon, it is definitely directed to us. Like, it's something that we talked about maybe a day or two before.
Yeah.
And it's like definitely God working through him.
One of the things that I really struggled with was what happened to Jake when he passed away. And it was funny because the first time I looked up that Perry Noble study, that was his sermon, What Happens to You When You Die. So it's been things like that. And then my mom was talking about, like, if God is such a loving God, how can He send somebody to hell? And that was his next sermon. It's just been really crazy the way that God has worked through Perry Noble to speak to me. So
another thing that we learned through all of this actually stood out to me when Dave was preaching at Southeast, is that God can work in spite of all of our bad decisions. And the way that worked in my life was, I was into drugs and alcohol when I was younger in high school, and even going on in my freshman and sophomore year of college, and I didn't know that I was going to make a big impact like this. But through all the trial that I had to go through with my aunt kicking me out of her house, forcing me to be independent, and all the bad decisions that I made, God's work in spite of that, and also revealing His strength through my weakness. And I don't know, my mom, the whole time I was in school and I was just working so hard to get through, I was so ready to quit, but she kept telling me, God's got so many big plans for you, Sarah. Don't give up. And I can definitely see where God was definitely working in me, even in spite of all the choices that I had made in my past.
And for me, for God working in spite of our bad choices, it was actually my husband's bad choice in this case, but he has, just the way that he's taken my life and completely turned my attention to him, because I was so focused on my husband. Like, I lived for my husband for those 10 years that we were together. every choice I made was with my husband or for my husband. I wasn't focused on God at all, and God really got my attention and said, your focus isn't where it's supposed to be. It's on your husband when it really should be on me. And it's been life-changing for me. So, and I've seen him working in my life, and even with me starting to ask questions, like, I think I've really kind of tested my pastor, because I've been asking him so many questions, and he's been forced to kind of dig into his beliefs too. So, and he's told me that he's grown as much as I have throughout this, and my family just, I don't know, my family's really started to hear my testimony, and so it's inspired them. My mom started doing a Bible study, and they're digging into the Bible more. So it's helped me, it's helped my family, it's helped Sarah's family, my pastor. It's just everybody that's been touched by Jake's death has grown spiritually, and it's just really cool to see.
Definitely, yeah, because like my family would have never thought of, they went to church when they grew up, and as they got older, my mom went. But in my younger life, my parents kept getting divorced and married, and my dad would cheat on her, and she kind of just lost her faith, and she stopped going to church. My brother stopped going to church. My dad stopped going to church, and now my brother's starting to go to church now, just seeing what's going on in our lives, how God's been working, and my mom's starting to go to church with us, and it's just touched so many people around us that even though just that one bad decision that Jake made, that it has touched so many lives around us and has brought so many people closer to God. So it's just a great way to see how God can work even though we make poor decisions in our life.
And one of the verses that really I've taken comfort in is Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. And that just reminds me that even though this was bad, God has a plan for it, and he's making it good. And actually, Perry Noble has a saying, if it ain't good, God ain't done. So, I don't know, that's just...
It's interesting that it wasn't your bad decision.
Yeah.
It was, but you were left to pay the consequence
Right.
of that bad decision.
Right. Yeah. That's been an eye-opener, too, because it's not just your decisions, it's other people's decisions that affect your life, and they can completely change your life. So.
But you talk about some of your bad decisions.
Yeah.
And this one affected you, but yet you both found yourself in similar places because of those. Okay.
It's crazy because me and her have like completely opposite backgrounds. She lived, a really easy life, and her parents were together, and everything kind of came easy to her. My life, my parents were continuously back and forth. My dad was cheating on my mom. I was back and forth with, didn't get divorced, married, and my dad marrying other women and having to adjust to new families, and
The
that
drugs
was
and the drinking.
the drugs
I
and the
never
drinking.
struggled with any of that.
Yeah. So that was, it's crazy how God brought us together. We've been such good friends, and we've kept God first in our friendship, and it's just, we're so totally opposite, but at the same time, we're so similar, and we're growing so much together in God, so. But another crazy thing is that we, so in March, before I knew anything about Whitney, anything about Jake, I was coming home on the weekends to work, and I was studying in Job. I had no idea why. I was stuck in it. I couldn't understand it. And then, so I bought the Wayfinding Bible. I don't know if you guys are similar. I know Megan and Christy, you guys have that Bible. Mm-hmm. But there's an exploration point, and it kind of describes to you kind of what God's message is, even though it may, you can get totally different messages every time you read it, but it's just kind of giving an overview of what they think it meant. So I was flipping through Job the other day, and I sent you this text. I sent you the picture, and it was about how God prepares people for people who are suffering loss or suffering anything in their life, going through a certain struggle, and how to be compassionate, how to just be there to listen and just love them. And I look back at that, and I think it's crazy because that was God preparing me for Whitney. So even though I had no clue it was preparing me, that now I look back and I'm just like, wow, how crazy is it that God was just putting it right there in front of me and teaching me all of this. And if it wasn't for Christy, I would have never bought this Bible. I would have never, wanted to read or study the Bible. And I just think it's awesome how God's worked through every single one of people in my past to lead me to where I am now.
And you had underlined the exploration
I
point.
had underlined it and everything. I look back and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So for you guys, if you think God's not working in your life right now, if you think you're kind of in a rut and you're just like, I'm in a dry season, how's God using me right now? There's just no way. Later on, I think that's when God works in you the most. That's when you're growing the most, is when you don't even realize it. Because that's happened to me.
And another cool thing about the Job is when I started doing my counseling, my pastor, the first time when he said he was praying for me, but he also said that I should read the book of Job because it related to my story, so it was so similar. And I didn't read it because at that time I just wanted answers to why. I didn't really want to dig into the Bible yet. So 2 weeks later, I think it was, I started reading the book of Job, and that was really what like just transformed my attitude towards, like I was so focused on saving my husband, which sounds really crazy, but I was just so focused on saving him and so focused on why he did it, trying to figure that out, that I wasn't focused on myself and my spiritual growth and how I was going to get through it. And so when I read that book of Job, it was just like Job had everything. He had this perfect life, and God came and took it away, and yet he was so faithful. And I think that was when I really realized that I, up to that point, had been in control of my life. Like, I thought I was living for God, but I was totally living the way that I wanted to live. And that was when I realized that God wanted control of my life. And so that was like a real change for me. So it was just ironic that we were both reading Job at the same time. Or at least then I thought it was irony, but I don't know, it's God working. It was definitely God working.
Yeah.
People don't usually fall into the book of
Yeah.
Job. Job, I'm sorry. You don't hear that a lot.
So the last thing that we really have learned from all this is that we don't have to understand God, we just have to have faith in Him. And this has been the biggest thing for me because before this, like I thought everything was coincidence. I didn't believe in the supernatural. I didn't even know really if I believed in the whole gospel, the whole story, because I had never seen the supernatural. I had never seen or heard God talking to me personally. It was just I just had these doubts, and I couldn't get through them. I couldn't get past them. And being an engineer, I have to have answers for everything. Like, I just have to understand why things work and how things work, and there has to be an answer. And through all of this, there are no answers. There's no answer to why my husband did it. I don't know why he took his own life, and I never will know. I don't understand God's plan for it. I know He must have a plan, but I don't know what it is. And I think, for me, the biggest thing that I've learned is that it's okay to ask questions. Like, that's how we grow in our faith, is by asking questions. We can't be afraid to ask questions, but at the same time, like, I just can't figure everything out. I don't have to have the correct answer for everything. I just need to look in the Bible, and the Bible, that's where the answer is. It's in the Bible. So I just needed to dig into that, and that's been my biggest thing that I've learned throughout all of this. And the way that God has spoke to me, I mean, we had a song that I told Sarah about, Jesus in Disguise. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but it's just like the way that He's been talking to us is Jesus in disguise. Through the Jesus Calling book, through the Bible studies that we're doing, they fit so perfect into our story right now. It's just amazing the way that He's speaking to us. And then, like, when we first met, I couldn't listen to any Christian music at all without crying. I would just bawl my eyes out. So, and I don't even know why that was so hard for me, but it was. And so she had invited me to go to Kings Island because they were having, what was it called? Spirit Fest. And it was a Christian concert. So we went up to Kings Island for the day, and we went to the concert, and I was perfectly fine. Like, I didn't cry at all. It was a blast. And that was really the first time I think I had fun, too, since my husband passed away. And so ever since then, I have been listening to Christian music, and it's been a blessing. I mean, God has spoken to me through different songs, the lyrics. One day I heard a song, and I had listened to the song so many times before, but I had never really listened to the lyrics, and I was at work, and the song came on, and for some reason I just completely stopped what I was doing, and I listened to those lyrics, and it was speaking directly to me. And I texted her, and I was like, "You're never going to believe this." But it was just so weird because it was speaking directly to me, and I had heard it so many times. So just having that faith, I don't understand God's plan. I still don't understand it, but I know He's working. I know He's making it good. So.
One of the biggest things out of this and the Job thing, one of the ways that God has been working through me is just like being encouraging Whitney and being there for her and being compassionate. And I feel like the Holy Spirit has really been working through me. Like I work third shift, so I sleep during the day, which is very hard, but like I can't sleep. But I'll wake up and I'm just like, I have this big burst of energy, and I'm just like, I just gotta text Whitney. So I'm like texting her, like, probably like text this long. I texted her a text one so long that it was like a little bitty text with an arrow, and it goes into a whole different page.
It opened into a whole nother page.
Yeah, so, and it's weird though, because, I mean, I had no idea what Whitney was doing at the time, and she, apparently, every time that I texted her these encouraging texts, she was always bawling her eyes out, had no one to really talk to, and
I was really struggling, and every time I would be struggling, I would be crying, and I didn't have anybody to call, and randomly Sarah would send me a text. And it was just like, it was exactly what I needed, just that little bit of encouragement to get me through the night.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What do you think God is preparing you guys for?
we're trying to figure that one out.
So you know that you're in a season of growth and a
Oh,
season
yeah.
of preparation.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. We think it's, I don't know, we just keep saying God's preparing us for something big, but we have no idea what it is yet.
Yeah, no idea. We know it's something big though. It may not be big as in like around the whole world or anything, because something big could just be working in our own town and spreading God's word. So, I mean,
One could make a case that something big has already happened.
yeah,
That's
I hope so. I know that one morning or one afternoon I woke up and I had the urge to just, I don't know, look up different quotes on Pinterest, and there was actually a video that popped up, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to read it or listen to it. So it popped up again, and so I looked and I read it, and it said, what if God left Job alone? So I clicked on it and I read it, or I watched it, and it made me just bawl. But at the beginning of the video, it says, how can you find a God of mercy in the book of Job? And this man talks about how he can find I don't know if you guys know Bob Sorge. He's like a preacher, but he lost his voice, and he was a worship leader, he was a pastor, and for 5 years or so he was in a theological crisis, and he doubted God, but he said the only 3 words in his prayers were, I love you, God, or I love you. I don't understand you, but I love you. And I don't know if there's any way that we can show you guys that video. I don't know if Bill can.
There is, and we would love to.
Okay.
Any questions, guys, before we do? Because do you have anything after that, or are you kind of?
I think that's it.
Guys, any questions? What do you think?
Gabby.
Love you guys.
Amen.
I have to leave, but will
You're fine.
you send me, like, if you can, like, send me the link to that video?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, don't watch that.
I've got the link, but it's also with a long
Yeah,
text,
sorry
so
about
it'll
that.
come. No, never ever.
Can you send a link out to everyone? Should do that?
Yeah, I could do that.
But we'll see it again.
Okay.
Can you send me that video that's recording?
Yeah, I can.
Oh yeah.
It's a long video too, like a.
Sorry, we try to condense this into like as much small as we could.
It's still recording.
It's a lot longer before.
Yep. Still, what are we at right now? 30